Jemma Wilson and Ash Ivory are two women who are passionate about riding motorcycles. There's no doubt about that, as I'm sure you're going to hear this evening. They're also each committed to making motorcycles as accessible as possible for everyone. And they're women who really are changing and challenging the image of motorcycle riding. Ash, why did you take to it? Take us to your first experience of motorcycles.
Oh God, I was hoping you'd call on Jemma first, Amanda, because I'm not sure if my story is as exciting as Gemma's. My story is pretty typical. My dad rode, and I grew up in a very small town, a little coastal town called Mission Beach, and we would often sleep over at mates' places, and as you find in the shed, there's always some type of two-wheel or four-wheel device, and as kids you tend to see what you can hook up to the back of that device. So a lot of the time we were riding quad bikes with car bonnets attached to the back. So that was sort of my first experience.
Why car bonnets attached to the back of a quad bike?
Oh, the car bonnet is a fantastic shape if you turn it upside down, tends to not have too much drag, and you can fit at least two small children on the back. So probably not the safest, and I'm definitely not condoning this if there's any small children listening at home. But we made do with what we had. There's always for some reason, there's always a Valiant somewhere in some field rusting, and you can generally get the bonnet off that. So that was one of my first experiences. But from a family perspective, in all seriousness, my dad is quite passionate about motorcycles, rode for a very long time. And I would, often find myself on the back of those bikes. So that was my sort of first experience as a young child.
Jemma, what about for you?
I think mine's less exciting. Same story as most, with dad and older brother that rode. We had a bit of a house rule that we weren't allowed to ride until we were 12. So my dad got me a DT 175 when I was 11 and a half, and it sat in the shed, and I was allowed to go and start it, but I wasn't allowed to ride it. So it just got me really keen for 6 months. And then it was just a Sunday thing to do. I grew up, in the bush, backed onto forestry, and it just, started, and I'd ride a bit, with family and friends, and then did a trail ride and did another trail ride, and then eventually got into racing. And it was just a very gradual and organic thing to get to where I am now, where motorcycling is my life.
Well, you, Jemma, were a professional off-road motorcycle racer for about 13 years, I think. And over that time, you won 4 Australian off-road championships and 5 Women's World Cup team championships, among the many things you won. What did you love about racing?
That's a good question. And I ask myself that now, as a retired racer. Hindsight's a beautiful thing. And I think, wow, what kept me there for so long? And I just had a passion and drive for it, and it was all consuming for 15 years. And now looking back, it was the adventure, the thrill that you get from achieving something, especially with enduro. You're always riding off into the unknown. Weather conditions, you can have bull dust ruts that go for days, or mud ruts that go for days, and once in a blue moon you'll get perfect conditions and ride in chocolate cake goodness. And the people that you meet, of course, it really is, it sounds a bit cliche, but an enduro family, and it's true. I've got an enduro family around the world these days. And it was a lot of hard work. And like I said, now looking back, I'm like, oh, man, I must have loved it. And I obviously just did. Yeah.
Ash, when did you move from being on the back of your dad's motorcycle to getting on your own?
That's a brilliant question. So when I went through the process of getting my license, there was just a simple tick box of, get the motorbike learner's license as well. So at 15 and a half, I kind of ticked that box, but didn't really get on a bike for a while. And when I was 18, I lost my mum to cancer, and my dad sort of started to get back out in the dating world, and he started dating a woman for a while, and it didn't work out, and that kind of worked to my advantage because he bought her a motorcycle and I inherited that motorcycle. And it was a really brilliant way for Dad and I to spend time together without, I guess, the confrontation of, discussing grief and things like that. And it was a really nice way for Dad to teach me something. And I think it took his mind off, losing Mum. Dad and I are very similar as well. So he couldn't really teach me to drive a car. Mum kind of took care of that. So I think he was quite thankful to kind of connect over bikes when we lost Mum. So that was around the age of 18. I kind of had a break for about 10 years, and then went through a breakup of my own and decided I'm going to cut my hair and get a motorcycle. And my now wife rides as well. We ride together. And yeah, it's I kind of really connected to Jemma's comment there about it being all consuming. It really is. I think once it kind of gets in your blood, it's quite hard to get rid of.
Going back to that story about your dad, that's both a sad and beautiful story, I think, about a connection between the two of you without, as you say, on a bike, you're not looking at each other, you don't have to talk, but there is some kind of connection, I suppose. That's what you're saying, isn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. And Dad was a classic dad. We went to, the local school car park, and I think I did about 2 figure eights, and he was like, yep, you're good, let's go. And we jumped on the highway for 2 hours. And, highway riding's quite easy. If you sort of ask most motorcyclists, it's when you kind of get to the other town on the other side and you've got to go through, roundabouts and things like that it gets a little bit more tricky.
Jemma, what do you ride these days?
I've been working with Husqvarna for the last 3 years, and I have almost ridden all of the range in that 3 years because there's so many. So at the moment, I have an FE 250, so a 4-stroke 250, and I was always a 250 4-stroke rider as a racer, and this is my 3rd year being retired. So I had 3 years off of the 250, and I've just jumped back on it, and I love 250s, and I'd forgot how much I love them. But I've also got a TC85, so a kid's bike, a kid's 2-stroke at the moment, and I'm quite a short person, so it fits me nicely. And that's been a lot of fun because I started at 12. I missed the, 2-stroke 65, 2-stroke 85. And so my dad's running joke at the moment is he deprived me of that in my teenage years. So I'm doing it now in my 30s.
And Ash, what do you ride?
So I started on a little TU 250X. So it's a Suzuki, very approachable bike. If it starts to kind of get away on you, you can almost just pick it back up. So I learnt to ride, or sort of did my my 2 years of purgatory on the little RE bike that you kind of have to do. So I did that on the TU, and it was fantastic. I'm now on a Triumph street scrambler. So most motorcycle people should be pretty familiar with that bike, but if you're not, it's definitely not a scrambler. You don't really take them off road, let's be honest. They're a little bit more of a show bike, but it's a lot of fun to ride. It's a 900, so not sort of too powerful for around Brisbane as well. Someone asked, I think they wanted to know what the initial bike I got that Dad gave me. It was a Kawasaki Eliminator, so a very kind of different style bike to what I normally like a cruising bike. So, and my father-in-law has that bike now, which is pretty cool.
Jemma, is there still a dream motorcycle on the horizon that you haven't yet owned or ridden?
Not really. I'm not like your typical motorcycle enthusiast. I've just raced them for years, but now as I get like that little bit older and I'm on the other side of racing, so something I've realized too is I lived in this race bubble for 15 years where I didn't realize there was a world of motorcycling outside of it. And now with what I'm doing, I realize that. And so I'm new to the road world, and I've run a couple of road events, and I've started running a fancy ladies road ride. So we stay in a mansion, we have a private chef come in, we have high tea, and we also ride our motorcycles. So Husqvarna gave me their Smart Pillin 401 and a Vit Pillin 401 as well, which my husband's been riding with me a little bit. And that's been a lot of fun. So And I'm also borrowing a 701, so the Trek bike, and riding through the Kimberleys later this year. So from Broome to Darwin, just with my dad and my husband. So I actually have the opportunity to really just ride them all. I've even got a little electric EE5 at the moment, a Husqvarna electric bike, and that's just been so much fun as well, riding a little electric bike around and teaching my little sister. I have a 4.5-year-old little sister, so teaching her to ride on that and stuff as well has been really cool. So I live in this beautiful world where any motorcycle I want to ride, I pretty much can. I just ask Husqvarna.
This can dream on.
Yeah.
Gemma, do you use a motorcycle as a transport vehicle, as commute?
So I never have, but I've had this Spark Pillin now since November. It's just on loan. I was supposed to give it back in January, but it's still in my shed. And I have been riding it out to school as a commute. And yeah, it's nice. It's different, you know, putting the helmet on and having that half an hour, 40 minutes, about 40 minutes out to Kilkeven. I work at this little Western school as a relief teacher. And yeah, put my helmet on and have my little 40 minutes to myself on the way out, and then 40 minutes to myself on the way back. But it has been very hot the whole time I've had it. So I am looking forward to hopefully having it for long enough to experience the whole cold side of riding a motorcycle as well on the road.
Ash, you're a keen commuter on your motorcycle, I think, yeah?
Yeah, so Jen and I actually sold our second car, so it's definitely rain, hail or shine for me. So I live out at Redcliffe, and it takes me on a good day about 40 minutes. On a bad day it can be, you know, a little bit longer than that. And same, Jemma, I really love that time that you kind of just have in your helmet. And I've really resisted the urge to put music on as well, because I kind of like to be present, and I do commute through the city, so some of the parts can be a little bit congested, especially, you know, if you've driven through Brisbane. Can be a little bit of a madhouse. So yeah, I have that time in the morning and in the afternoons, and really love it. And you're right, Jemma, it gets a lot. It's a whole different thing in winter. Sometimes you can't feel your fingers.
John, so sorry, one last thing on the road bikes. My husband and I rode around the city together as part of a little Husqvarna movie, like a little film. It's went out on socials just last week. It's called Coffee Date. It's really cool. It shows the two bikes, but it's really nice that John and I have this really, like, you know, properly made and presented little movie of us going on a coffee date together. So it's pretty cool.
I haven't asked you, Ash, about your dream motorcycle. Is there one out there that that you want to get?
I think I'm one of those people that just sort of want to ride all the bikes, but I recently rode an R18, it's BMW, sort of a new cruiser style bike. And I didn't think I would love it, and I actually really loved it. So that would be cool. Maybe a Bruff Superior as well. There's a few of those in the exhibition, and they still make Bruff Superiors today. So I'd love to own one of those, or maybe an old Norton. I'll probably stop now because the whole talk will be just me listing bikes. So.
Yes, okay. Hey, has either of you ever been told you couldn't or shouldn't ride a motorcycle, or you felt excluded from riding on account of being a woman? Jemma?
No, not specifically or that openly. My dad always was like, you can do anything. And I definitely grew up thinking that. And I think when I entered the sport, I was just so happy and so optimistic. And even if someone did say that, I wouldn't have heard it. I think then as I got a little bit older and you get a little bit more wise to what's going on around you and the politics of things, I did have a few little hurdles, like at World Championships, having people like on management that just treated you kind of poorly just because you were one of the girls, and kind of thought that you should be there, like, you know, as this side thing, and maybe like don't take their time because their time should be spent on the boys. But it didn't stop me at all, and probably made me want to do it more. So I definitely haven't had a rough trot in that way. I think that most people have been pretty supportive, and if they weren't, I didn't want to know them anyway.
What about you, Ash?
Oh, definitely. I don't know I don't know what it is about being a woman on a motorcycle, but it definitely invites a lot of opinions. So yeah, I've been told plenty that I shouldn't ride, or and maybe to your
Who?
point, Amanda, it's not always about whether you're a woman or not as well. I think a lot of people just have very strong opinions about motorbikes, especially if they've had, if someone they know has had a pretty serious, incident with a bike or something like that. So yes, absolutely. Jen and I were down at the GOMA exhibition. They had the uh, Historical Motorbike Society, and I was talking to a lot of the guys who had sort of restored and built bikes. And I think a lot of the most common assumption I get, other than you shouldn't be riding bikes, is do you ride a scooter? So that tends to be the other assumption. Maybe I just look like a scooter rider. I don't know. Maybe I'm on the wrong type of bike.
What do you say when they suggest that you, or think that you must ride a scooter?
I generally put them straight pretty quickly, because I really love my bike. So I generally tell them what bike I ride, and kind of go down that path. And then I guess to extend on your point, if there is a negative reaction about not riding bikes, I try to not get too defensive, and understand where the opinion's coming from. And just hear them out. And then, like Jemma said, you just kind of walk away and leave that conversation there, and get on with riding your bike.
Yeah. The kind of language around motorcycle riding is very often words like freedom and escape and rebellion. Steve McQueen in The Great Escape, Marlon Brando in Rebel Without a Cause, or Peter Fonda in Easy Rider. Do those words like freedom and escape and rebellion apply to why you ride? Jemma?
Not rebellion. I think because the way I've done motorcycling is it's a sport and a career as an athlete. So it was the opposite of rebellion. It was commitment and like sacrifice and drive. But definitely freedom and escape. And I sort of probably didn't realize that first 15 years of commitment to it, because I was so like, get better, get faster, lap times. But now, as someone who goes for a ride for fun, and I was coaching on the weekend, and when I'm coaching, I don't do a lot of riding. I do a couple demos, and then I let the other girls ride, and then we move on and I do the next set of demos. And there was a corner that I got to do quite a few times, demoing the different lines. And then I just get carried away, and I just want to do it more and more. And I do get that feeling then of like freedom and escape. And I go, oh my gosh, I love this. And I forgot for the last week because I hadn't ridden for a week. So yes, 2 of those words, but no, not the third.
No. Ash, freedom, escape, rebellion?
Yes, probably all of them. Probably rebellion more than I'd like to admit, but definitely all 3. I think I tend to feel it because riding is so part of my routine as well. So it's quite sort of meditative, I guess. So if I've had a crap day, riding home helps that way. Or if I've got a busy day, it kind of gives me a moment of reprieve in the morning. And I tend to feel it if I haven't ridden for a couple of days. I tend to get a little bit irritable, and then I kind of realize maybe I haven't been on the bike or something like that. So it's become more of a mental health kind of exercise for me as well, I think. But absolutely freedom as well, being able to just kind of get on the bike and go somewhere on the weekend, and it's a completely different feeling from being in a car. And I think you ask people that have ridden for many years, it's quite hard to put words to the feeling. And I think it's because it's one of those very indescribable things, and that's what kind of hooks people so much, is they can't reproduce that feeling anywhere else, and so they get pretty hooked on bikes.
Jemma, can you put into words when you are racing how it feels going as fast as you can on a motorcycle?
So enduro is a little bit different in that it's not crazy high speeds, because it's going through the bush, over rocks, through rivers, logs. And so you might be doing 20 k's an hour, but it feels very fast because you're very close to trees. But then there are you get up to 80, 90 in sections as well, but it's not high speed.
But you are going as fast as you can in
As
the
fast as you
terrain.
can, yeah. And I think some days you have like a day where you don't really gel with the bike, and they're few and far between. And then when you have those days where everything just flows and works, and it's all about technique on the road, of course, as well, but on the dirt, it's so about technique, because you have to find the traction, and you've got so many different surfaces and things. And so when you find that traction and corners flow and hard sections work, and you don't crash in the giant rock pile that you have the 20 times beforehand, and you get that flow, that's what's beautiful, I think, in enduro more than speed. And now that I ride on the road a bit, and I've got my little 401, and it's not crazy fast, but I've done the highest speeds I've ever done on a road bike in safe sections, but and it's a totally different feeling, and I'm like screaming inside my helmet and I can't go any faster.
Ash, do you have a need for speed?
No, not particularly, because I think riding a little bit later in life has made me a bit more calculated on, risks that you take on the road. So, but like Jemma said, there are definitely days where I feel the same. You don't gel with the bike, and it's just something's off and it's not working. And I think because I ride a similar track, home and back, you kind of get used to how you maneuver and how you go through corners and things like that. And then you just get days where it just all works and it's just amazing. And then you kind of don't want to pull in home. You just want to keep riding. So, but I think naturally the sensation of being on a bike means, 80 on a bike can feel quite fast. And that's probably one of the pieces of feedback that I've had from new riders that I've ridden with is, oh my God, I've done this stretch of road at 100 Ks and we're doing it at 60 and I'm petrified. So yeah, I think it opens up a completely different sensation to speed.
Yeah. Ash, can you just talk a bit more about the rebellion part of why you ride?
Yes, I think I live a pretty standard life, really. And I'm so I work in software in my day job, and obviously, we have weekends where we can go and do different things and explore. But I think motorcycling is one of those things that's pretty close to being a rebel without, really taking too many crazy risks in life. And I think that resonates with a lot of people. I think that's what Harley built, a pretty successful brand on. And that I think that's sold a lot of motorbikes still to this day for them. So I think for me, it's a way to express a little bit of the crazy part of my personality. I need to be pretty measured and pretty strategic at work. So getting on the bike means I can be a little bit free and a little bit more myself and kind of let as much hair down as I have. So that's sort of, I think, the rebellion part for me. And you meet rebellious people that you think aren't really rebellious, and you kind of get in part of a community, and you start talking to people and you realize they've lived this really amazing life, and motorcycles has kind of allowed them to do that as well. So I think it can be just a vehicle for opportunity and rebellion outside of the 9 to 5 or, whatever you want to define that as.
Mm. Jemma, when you were enduro racing or now even, is danger part of the appeal for you, would you say?
No, I mean, the danger is there, of course, but you're always taking those calculated risks. And to the point where you're actually like, there's a section and there's a hard line and an easy line, and you go, is that hard line worth the risk, or should I take the chicken line? And then there's all the little micro decisions that you make along the way. And so I think that, I think that I don't take risks, but I guess, like I was coaching some kids the other weekend and they're very new to riding. And I did a couple laps to show them how much to move around on the dirt bike, because you're constantly moving on a dirt bike. And I pulled up and they were like, oh my gosh, were you scared? And I was like, oh, well, no, because that was within my comfort level, but your comfort level is different because you've only been riding for a couple of months. So the danger is there, but I always try to minimize that as much as possible. So it's not really part of the appeal.
What's the best, most memorable ride, Ash, that you've done?
There's a couple, but I'll try to keep them short. I often sort of take, I've taught a few people to ride. I've taught my wife to ride. So, you know, the first ride out with her once she had gotten her license was pretty memorable. I have two stepchildren as well, and taking them on the back for the first time was immensely memorable, you know, and it's kind of one of those moments where I don't know whose smile was bigger, mine or you know, my stepkids. They were pretty memorable, and I've taught a really good friend of mine, Anna, to ride, and she was it's interesting, like psychologically, like your mind can absolutely play, you know, into riding as much as other sport. So I've played, you know, competitive sport, and you can really get stuck in your head with things like that, and riding isn't any different. So I was teaching a friend of mine to ride, and she was a little bit of a overthinker. So having, you know, seeing her for the first time just kind of let go and go with the bike and kind of not overthink corners and things like that was quite memorable as well. And yeah, she's a super competent rider now. So they're probably my top like 3 or 4 rides, even though you asked me for one.
No, that's all right. It was good. It was good to hear all 3. Jemma, what about you? Top rides?
Actually, in 2019, I rode to the Cape. So from Cairns to Cape York with North Queensland Trail Bike Adventures. It's a friend of mine, a girl who's come on quite a few of my events, and we made friends. And then her dad owns this company and she works with him. And so we did that ride, and that was fantastic. And I'd never been further north than Cairns, and it's Australia. It's Queensland, but it's a whole other world. It was so beautiful and so much fun. And then I've done like a lot of international races, and they're not always fun. The hard work and the feeling that you get at the end is very fun. But there was a round of the World Championships in Romania that I did actually thoroughly enjoy, which was unusual to enjoy a World Championships. And also the 6 days in Slovakia. So they both happen to be Eastern European countries, but that 6 days as well was just magnificent. We had a little bit of rain every night that just made the tracks perfect, and the scenery and stuff was beautiful. So yeah.
All right, can we talk about the important stuff now? Helmet hair. Is it an issue for either of you?
I like that you brought that up, because I've just started using a company called Hightail Hair, and it's a little hairnet that attaches to the back of your helmet, and it's made specifically for road. And because I've just got onto road, I've started using it, and I've got a lot of hair, and I can just tuck it up in there. And I've done a couple of really wet rides where there's no part of me that is dry except for my hair, which is great when you have curly hair. And I've actually just attached it to my dirt bike helmet as well. And I used it on the weekend at an event, and it was great just to tuck my hair up in there. So, and on road too, you don't get dust in your hair, so it stays much nicer. But dirt biking, it just turns into a matted, horrible mess.
Ash, any issues with helmet hair?
I don't have a whole lot of hair. My hair looks like this. But yeah, I mean, sometimes it's a little bit messier. Actually, I've caught up with another rider this afternoon. Her name's Nettie. She's Adventures of Nettie on Instagram. She's pretty cool. She rides a little TU as well. And my hair was like this in those photos because I'd kind of just gotten off the bike, took my helmet off, and it was a bit crazy. But, you know, shorter hair, and I'm kind of rocking a lot of hats these days off the bike, makes it a little bit easier. But Jemma, I have heard of those hair tails, and I've heard they're amazing. So I think they're an Aussie company as well. Hey.
Yeah, and just random side note, the guys who own it, it's John and Jen, and my husband and I are John and Jem, and they're both spelled Jon with no H. It's meant to be.
That's awesome.
There you go. Well, now, look, you're both in different ways committed to encouraging others to ride. Ash, you've told us a bit about that already. But can you tell us about your neutral motorcycle collective?
Yeah, I can. So I am a graphic designer, kind of by trade, I guess. I went to college for that, and it's hard to kind of keep a designer away from branding stuff. So when I started writing, I wanted to create a few stickers. We were online trying to find, you know, the watch for motorcycle stickers and things like that, and I couldn't find any good ones, so I ended up just designing them myself. And as you do, as a designer does, you know, you spend 90% of the time on the brand, and 10% of the time actually making the rest of the design. So I ended up branding these stickers up, and I started sort of injecting myself into community meets and things like that. So around Brizzy there's like caffeine and gasoline and a few of those things, and I couldn't really give stickers away. You tend to find motorcycle people are actually quite good people, so I printed a whole bunch up and sort of gave them out at a few events, and people said, can you make more, and would you do this design? And so it kind of grew organically from there, and it's turned into a little bit more of a brand now, where we do t-shirts and stickers and things like that. But for me, it's kind of a way to sort of sneak in a little bit of roadcraft and I guess knowledge about riding well on the road, and say more safe, safe riding and things like that. So it's kind of like when you put veggies in with stuff kids want to eat, and they don't really realize they're eating it. So it's a little bit of that, and also a bit of a selfish way for me to meet really awesome people who ride motorbikes as well. I think that's part of the appeal of riding, is all the amazing people that you meet through that. And if you ride and you pull up to a cafe and there's another rider there, they will beeline for you. And it's also a nice way for me to sort of go, here's a sticker, I'll meet you online, kind of thing. And let's keep the connection alive that way as well. So that's kind of how Neutral started. And then we run Gather Moto Meet as well, which is just a motorcycle meet on the north side. We don't really care what type of bike you ride, as long as you drink coffee and you're keen for a chat. We run those once a month as well. So yeah, it's really just been a way for me to selfishly make friends and share a few stickers, I guess.
Well, Jemma, since retiring from racing, you've been coaching riders, and as you've talked about, you run ride days and trail rides. Some of the events are for women, some are mixed. What is it though that you've found that women tend to struggle with most about motorcycle riding, about learning to ride?
In the off-road world, women are amazing to coach. And the biggest thing that they struggle with isn't like technique or ability or speed, it's confidence. And I have so many women show up who previously have only ridden with their husband, their dad, their brother, and all of their friends. And usually like they are the slowest of the group. And then they just think that they're slow. But they come to like a Fox Women's off-road camp out and realize that everybody starts somewhere, and the environment, it's just no intimidation. So the coaching events that I run for women, the 18 plus, which is the idea is to give the mums a weekend to themselves. They don't bring their daughters along then, and we cater. So it's like sometimes, the only time that a mum gets just fully waited on for a whole weekend. And yeah, they meet all these other women and realize that, yeah, you all start somewhere, and it's just, you're not there. If you're there, you're over 18, you're a female, and you're riding the bike. So there's no bystanders, there's no one judging. Everyone's having a go, and everyone's going to fall off at some point, including myself. And it's just, yeah, the giggling and the help that everyone gives one another, and the squeals when they do a mono for the first time. And it's just brilliant. And then I've expanded into a couple of bigger events, the Husqvarna Women's Trail Ride and the Fox Women's Ride Day, which isn't about coaching. It's just about the social side of things. So riding and social. And you have, like, I've sold over 100 tickets to the Husqvarna Women's Trail Ride for this year. It opened last Monday, so it's been open for a week. So yeah, to have that many women, and that's juniors as well. So we've got from like 4 years up, all together riding for the weekend at the most beautiful property at Green Park at Conondale. I'm just inland from the Sunshine Coast. You just can't beat that environment. It's really fantastic. And for young girls to see that sea of women riding bikes is just brilliant. But I also do it for a bit of a selfish reason too. So my tagline is creating a women's dirt biking community, but it is totally for myself as well. Because when I raced, like, I was not one of the boys. Like, I was friends with the boys, but I was not one of the boys. And they all had beautiful wives and girlfriends there, but I wasn't one of the wives or girlfriends on the sidelines either. So you do end up being a little bit of this lonely in between. And now I have a handful of wonderful close girlfriends who ride motorbikes, and you get to share that. And I also get to meet women from all different walks of life that all enjoy riding motorbikes. So I absolutely love what I'm doing these days.
And what have you learnt about riding from running these events and from coaching others?
The thing is, I think I ride better now that I don't race, because I spend so much time thinking about the technique and going over the technique and answering questions about the technique. And maybe the intensity and like the speed, wouldn't be there. But I think technically as a rider, I'm better now because I spend so much time thinking about it.
Well, the interesting thing is that for each of you, you've talked about, the idea of a community around motorcycles is important to you. So Ash, not so much the kind of lone rebel heading off on a road trip of self-discovery?
Oh, look, that would be amazing, Amanda, but I think I'd be quickly calling people at the other end, trying to kill the time as well. So like, I think the cool thing about bikes is it kind of promotes balance. So if you do just want to get on the bike and go as fast as, like Jemma was saying before, within your technique, if you want to go for a faster ride, you can. Or if you want to, slow down, go with a group and kind of plan the ride and plan the progression for the riders on the ride, you can do that as well. So I think for me, it is really about balance. And there are some weekends Jen and I will just go ourselves, and then there's weekends where we will get in a pack of riders and go. So yeah, it's absolutely sort of the balance side of things. Although I am really trying to get Jen to come moto camping with me, and she kind of keeps just avoiding the subject. So yeah, I'm taking it as a no.
For now. Oh well.
Now.
Jemma, where do you see yourself going with motorcycling, into the future? What have you yet to do that you want to do?
I want to keep doing what I'm doing, but do it better. And so every year I sit down with sponsors and companies that I work with, and I give them my plan, and I say, but that it's really open to interpretation, because I'll come up with something wicked in March, but we've agreed on things in February to do in November. But I just keep growing it and coming up with new ideas and new ways to make motorbike riding fun and to get people to come and ride more. Because quite often, you buy the bike, you buy the gear, you love it for 2 months, and then life kind of gets in the way. So my weekends are designed to keep that interest and to keep, create the event for women to go to and get excited about and practice beforehand, and then have the enthusiasm last for a few months after. And then just when they're starting to run out of enthusiasm, I have another really fun event that they can, come to and come with their families or friends, or, or just by themselves if it's a camp out. So yeah. And then I just really enjoy making people have a fun time. I like being a host. So I consider myself I'm not just a coach. I'm an events business. I run events, and I just want to get better at running really amazing events too. And then even outside of the sport, I would love to run weddings, because they're the best.
Wow.
So yeah, I don't know where it'll go, but I know that I love what I'm doing, and I just want to find even better ways to do it.
Can I ask you, Jemma, though, what causes a woman to stop riding, in your experience?
In my experience, so obviously growing up, started racing when I was 14. There was a lot of girls that come through 14, 15, 16, and then they get, licenses. They realize that it's they don't have to go with their parents anymore. And they realize that there's a life outside of bikes, and they can go do other things and go to the beach, and it's easier and it's fun. And maybe it wasn't their thing to start with. So we lose a lot of girls at that age. And then now with my camp outs that I'm running, I have so many women. We sit around the circle in the morning and introduce ourselves and say how long we've been riding for, and what our experience level is, which is really cool for girls who think that they have no experience to realize that there's people with less experience in the group. And I think that if I had been running these events, I've been running them for 5 years. This is my 6th year. And if I had been running them 10 years ago, it pretty much would have been myself in a paddock. The rate that women in motorsport is growing at this time is phenomenal. And there's so many women who go, I rode when I was 12, 13, 14 with my parents, with my dad, with my brother, and then I stepped away from it for 15 years. I rode when I was 25, but then I had kids and I've stepped away from it for 10 years. And now women are getting back into it. And also I have women who are like, I always wanted to ride, but my dad said I couldn't, and I'm 50 and he passed away 5 years ago. So it's my time. And, I've been there, I've done the kids, I've done the family, I've done the caring about everyone else in my life, but now it's time to care about me. So yeah, we lose women in the middle because life gets in the way. And so there's a window in the beginning and a window at the end, but hopefully we can keep girls in that window in the middle in the future.
Ash, what's the range of people like in your monthly meetup, the Gather Moto meet?
We literally everyone, Amanda, like we get bikes from sort of all different genres, I guess. So I really like the cafe racer style bikes, but you know, we get sport bikes, and we had a guy a couple of months ago who does like joy rides for elderly people, which is cool. So he's got like a little sidecar. So we get all types, and I think one of the things I love about Gather is, so all the bikes kind of park out the front of the cafe, and most of the riders kind of go in and grab their coffee and have a bit of a chat, and you kind of see people start to hover around the bikes, and they kind of have a bit of a sticky beak, and you know, it's I try to not spook them too much, but if you kind of, you know, sidle up to them slowly and start to talk to them about, you know, the bike and what they like about it, all of a sudden you'll be, you know, there 20 minutes later and you've given them a card to, you know, Q ride, and they're ready to ride. Someone before said, have we converted any non-motorcyclists to motorcyclists? I've probably talked to a lot of non-motorcyclists, and I think it has piqued a few people's interests. But yeah, we have a whole range of riders that sort of get involved, both young and old, and yeah, all different walks of life, which is really cool. And we've really been specific with Gather to say that it's not any particular motorcycle or a group or a style. And when I started Neutral, I was a little bit kind of inclined to maybe go the women's only approach, but for me it was more about looking past any gender, really, and it was sort of more about anyone, hence the play on words with Neutral. And that's been the same approach with Gather, with bikes and people. It just doesn't really matter as long as you ride, and as long as you know, ride safely, and you kind of don't wheelie out of the car park so we don't get kicked out next time. So yeah.
Look, in a moment I'm going to put to Jemma and Ash any questions that you want to put to them. So in the next couple of minutes, if you've got questions, quickly type them up in the chat window. Before that though, you've both been able to do something that I haven't yet, because I'm in Melbourne and because of COVID, and that's to see the exhibition at GOMA, the motorcycle. I've pored over the catalogue and it all looks amazing. But as riders, can you talk about what caught your eye in the show, Jemma?
So I really enjoyed it, and I didn't know if I would, because like I said a bit earlier in the show, I'm not really a motorcycle enthusiast. It's, you know, I was consumed by the sport. But so I went along and I really enjoyed it. And I actually went with my husband, who's also rides bikes, but with his cousin and his cousin's girlfriend, and they have nothing to do with bikes. Ned come for a ride with us once and he broke his wrist and hurt the other one. He's not allowed to come ever again. Only Debbie won't let him. And so we went through, and they had no idea about bikes and they absolutely loved it as well. It's just beautiful. The information, like I had no idea about some of the older bikes and how they were made and how long ago they were made, and just looking at them was spectacular. And then all the way through, you know, obviously Toby Price's bike's in there, and like he's a friend of mine, and that was really cool to see it in there. And the Ellerspeed, like where you create your bike, that was really cool as well. And they are awesome guys at Ellerspeed, and I do the dust tussle events on mini bikes and big bikes, and I try to mix it up every time and ride a different bike, and that's so much fun. But just the whole exhibition is fantastic, right through to the newest electric bikes at the far end. So yeah, it was brilliant. I loved it.
Ash, what caught your eye in the show?
I mentioned before the Brough Superior, and I'd done a lot of research on that particular bike. So that's an interesting bike to kind of look at. There's sort of a backstory about Lawrence of Arabia, and that's quite interesting. So I loved that bike. I've been notoriously a bit of a Harley poo-pooer over the years, but I've genuinely changed my mind about Harleys recently. I think they're doing some really amazing things to kind of revitalize their brand in the market. And I recently watched a documentary called Harley and the Davidsons. And so I kind of really went back through the way the Harley story evolved. And it's quite an interesting story. And there's a lot of really iconic Harley bikes that they talk about in that particular documentary. So I loved seeing that. And I mentioned the historical bike meet as well, and it was really cool. We were there on Saturday, and we were looking so in the day, Harley and Indian were quite, neck and neck, and they both had won a tender for one of the wars, and these two bikes looked identical pretty much, and they were part of this historical exhibition. And Jen and I were kind of looking at both going, they were built to a tender, and it was really amazing to see not only the bikes in the exhibition, which are just stunning, and they've done an amazing job, but also the local bikes that just kind of come out of the woodwork. And you see it a lot at DGR, the Distinguished Gentleman's Ride as well, these amazing old bikes that can actually still run, just kind of turn up out of nowhere. So I think that's what I appreciated, is they covered a lot of the timeline, but the old bikes and the craft, like I know that brands like Triumph really they've tried to retain the craftsmanship in the way the bikes are made now, but you look at some of the old ones and there's a lot of just man hours and manual labor that goes into putting those bikes together. And I kind of love that. And I love the war influence on bikes. I think the utilitarianism is quite interesting, and without kind of reading through the information, if you just kind of take the bike at, face value and try to analyze it yourself, it's quite an interesting exercise as well. And yeah, of course, someone's mentioned the electric Harleys. They didn't actually have one of those in the exhibition, but I have ridden one and they're fantastic. But the other end of the electric bikes is pretty amazing as well, because that's a whole other world. Like, Jemma, I don't know how you feel about the electric bike that you've been on, but it's kind of a bit of an unnerving experience at first, but once you settle in, it's amazing the power they can generate with electric bikes now.
Jemma?
Yeah, it's fantastic. And once you get used to the no noise, and from a coaching perspective, coaching kids on electric bikes is amazing, because they can so I'm a huge fan of electric bikes, and I definitely think there's a market for it, and there's a particular customer for it. It's the customer that has the little bit of land, enough to ride, but would annoy the neighbors if it was a bike. So yeah, and that's off-road obviously, so on-road's a bit different, but yeah, very cool. I can't wait to see what happens in the electric market.